The spirit of a thing. What's up, folks? Justin Garcia here, aka Master Chim, and welcome to The Pressure Project. ThePressureProject.com is our website. Info@ThePressureProject.com is our contact email. ThePressureProjectMembers.com is our membership site. And that was members. I just mumbled that. Pressure Project Members. How now, brown cow, right? So today we're going to talk about the spirit of a thing, and it's something that I've referenced before on other episodes, certainly on the live Facebook videos that I've posted before on Facebook. It's something that I think is very important. It's something that I think a lot of men sort of miss and mix up and sabotage and deny, but something very, very important. It's something that I wanted to sort of square away in this episode, right? So we're going to start with a definition. The definition of spirit, and I got this, I think, from, where did I get this? I think I got this from Wikipedia, right? And it says the word spirit is often used metaphysically to refer to the consciousness or personality of a thing. So we know, and I don't want to get all metaphysical mumbo jumbo here, right? We want to sort of keep the boots on the ground in the conversation. But we know when we hear spirit, we think of something abstract, something esoteric, something that isn't meat and potatoes in your hand. But we also understand what it means when we say, school spirit, get in the spirit, of a thing. We know that it's something that exists in an event or in a group's identity, and the application of doing a thing often requires, in order to fulfill the mission or the purpose of said thing, often requires to maintain the spirit of that thing, right? So I have my own definition, as I tend to do from time to time. And I like to say the spirit of a thing is the essence of its identity as represented by its RPS. And the RPS, we know, is the loyalty matrix decoded formula, right? My formula for identity. All right, so I'm going to repeat that. The spirit of a thing is the essence of its identity as represented by its RPS. RPS, ritual, procreation, survival. So I think when we look at what a thing is, right, the spirit of a thing, and I have a couple of examples, right? Today we're going to go over the martial arts, brotherhood, and bushcraft, right? I figured I'd do something different for a change. But when we look at those things, each one of them is represented by a ritual, procreation, and survival aspect. And too oftentimes, we venture away from one of those components, maybe all those components, and that is where we lose what I would call the spirit of a thing. All right, so we're going to start with martial arts. Now, martial arts obviously is something I'm very well versed in. I'm still connected to. It's very much a part of my life. For those of you who don't know, I own a couple of martial arts schools here in New York. I'm a former MMA fighter, competitive grappler, yada, yada, yada. And I have a complete disdain for the world of martial arts today. And so much of it has to do with this very thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over martial arts, and we're going to go over what that RPS is as it pertains to martial arts, and how martial artists, modern martial artists today, tend to screw it up. Okay? So techniques, mindset, and violence. RPS. What are the ritual of the martial arts? Well, we're going to bypass the ceremony for now, because a lot of times those ceremonies aren't really practiced as consistently today as they may have been in generations past. Right? We're not doing the tea ceremony of the Karate Kid before every class, right? So it's techniques, right? So I say ritual. I represent the ritual of martial arts in techniques. Right, the moves. People want to learn the moves. But one of the things that they don't learn is what I would say the procreation aspect of the martial arts, which is mindset. Right? So often today we see people who understand the moves to a very proficient level, right? Have developed a level of expertise in these techniques that is certainly impressive. But in the realm of martial arts, they alone do not preserve and maintain the spirit of the thing, the spirit of martial arts. Mindset, what I would say is the procreation aspect of the martial arts, is a integral part of what a martial artist is. In order to be a martial artist, you need to train your mindset. When we look at the survival aspect of martial arts, we have violence, right? And we look at all these three things together, techniques, mindset, and violence. We look at what represents martial arts. What is the identity of martial arts? Take out one of those things and you are incomplete. As soon as you take out one of those things, don't look at it as a sort of bucket that is filled with these three things, right? Don't think of it that way. Think of it as a sort of bridge, right? That's made up of these three components. Making any one of those things longer, right, doesn't extend lengthwise in this application, right? The metaphor of the bridge using these three components, they can only be a certain length. If you add to them, it just adds to the extravagance of that one section. But you need all of them to get from one side of the canyon to the other, right? I hope you're still following me, right? So when we look at the martial arts, so often today, remember, we live in the PC era of society. We live in the non-violent era of society, the culturally Marxist era of society. People who are true martial artists don't fit in this society. So rather than there being a pushback collectively from the world of martial arts against that pressure of society, we see the opposite, which is almost predictable. We see the world of martial arts sort of compromise its identity, right, to accommodate what is acceptable in the eyes of the unqualified eyes of society. Hope that makes sense. So the first thing that I teach my students here is the spirit of what martial arts is the violence, is the mindset. The techniques are almost secondary in priority to those two first things, only because those are the things that are going to allow us to understand the context under which we are training. We have a lot of sports schools in martial arts today, and not just Brazilian Jiu-jitsu. I'm always harping on, the demise of Brazilian Jiu-jitsu's integrity. But we could see a bunch of different martial arts: Taekwondo, karate, even boxing to some extent. We see that mindset is put in the back seat, and it's techniques, it's the moves that everybody hangs their hat on. It's not the guy who understands, how to create another generation of martial artists, who understands how to approach any sort of conflict, whether it be in a training scenario, out on the street, has the wherewithal, because of his mindset and his relationship with violence, to even adapt, if need be, in a situation where he may not have a move readily available, right, to apply. This is the spirit of martial arts. This is the spirit of that thing. And we see, when put in that context, we see how easily and how often it's thrown by the wayside nowadays, right? So let's move on. Brotherhood. So in brotherhood, and I'll call brotherhood basically a tribe of brothers, right? This is the relationship of men, with men socially, tribally. Right? I call it brotherhood because I don't want to deal with all the tribal elements right now of the generations of a tribe, women and children, families and such, but just a group of buddies, right? And it could be soldiers, it could be a football team, it could be a motorcycle club, it could be, a chess club that, meets and plays chess. It could be a guys at a bar, whatever the case is. Functions, entry through the wall, and growth/adversity. Functions, again, is the ritual of this brotherhood, right? We consider ourselves brothers often very easily as being represented by what we do together, right? What we do together. And all those examples I mentioned, it's not too far-fetched to just sort of visualize, how these brothers do the brotherhood, how they become the brotherhood, how they participate as a brotherhood. If it's a football team, they go and play football, right? Softball team, they go and play softball. If it's a biker club, they get on the bikes, they ride together, they hang out, they do these things. And when we look at it in those terms, from the outside looking in, it's very easy to observe, these people being who they are through the form of ritual, right? But it's an RPS formula. It's not an R formula. So there are two other aspects to it. And we have entry through the wall, and we have growth in adversity. With entry through the wall, it's really what are the criteria by which people are able to enter this brotherhood? Because, the saying goes, if everybody is your brother, nobody's your brother. I've always said, if everybody's treated like family, then what exactly is the value of being family with you? If there is no sort of extra value, no extra aspect to a relationship by moving through this threshold that's supposed to represent just that, right? If everybody is your brother, how could there ever be a brotherhood, any sort of exclusivity, in the sort of closeness of your relationships? We talk about, in podcasts past, we've talked about the concentric circles of tribe and how you have this inner circle, right? The innermost representing you as an individual. But beyond that, we have that tribe. And if there is no inner circle, if everybody qualifies for being there, what do you have, right? So when I say brotherhood, the procreation aspect of brotherhood being entry into the wall, what does that mean? That means there needs to be some thought given, some protocols established for who is there. Who is there? When we get into the survival aspect of brotherhood, I have growth in adversity. There's a business genius. I call him a genius. A lot of people do. His name is Dan Kennedy. And he has a lot of great, observations concerning business, the application of business. So many of these things being universal and very easily applied in different areas, not just business. One of them is they all go lame, right? He says, and he's referring to mostly to employees and the clients in this application. But what he's saying is given enough time, they all go, right? They all go lame. They all cease to maintain the nature of the relationship you have with them. Well, in a brotherhood, that directly goes against, the aspect of survival, right? So if they all go lame in a brotherhood over time, then what would we do to make sure that that doesn't happen? And I observe that and I say it is growth in adversity, maybe growth from adversity. But there needs to be, and this may be a familiar setting, or a familiar saying rather for me, there needs to be pressure. If we don't have pressure, there's no way we're going to become powerful. Well, in a brotherhood, what is it that you guys are facing? Who's the other team? What is challenging us to come apart that makes us cling to what we have that much tighter? Because if there is no force looking to pull us apart, then why do we hang out at all, right? And it only makes sense in that type of situation that we do over time drift away, undermining the identity of what the brotherhood is, right? So speaking of brotherhood, we have the functions of a brotherhood, which everybody sees. We have the entry into the wall, which not enough, in my opinion, people pay attention to, right? Your circle of friends. How does somebody become part of your circle of friends? Is there a requirement? Is there a process, right? We talk about, I remember speaking to a Grimnir, Paul Wagner, concerning his group, the Wolves of Vinland. And he talks about, the whole process of looking to become part of his group and how that process takes oftentimes over a year, right? And finally, there is an almost ceremonial, entry through the wall, into joining his group. Well, what is that group in your brotherhood? Is there any? Can people just come and go as they please? And if they can, what is the value of being in your group? Do you have a group at all? Right? So let's move on to something not so people-driven, but bushcraft. Right? So we've had wilderness expert Kevin Estella on, one of my SIAC brothers, one of the country's foremost experts on bushcraft, on survival, on all that cool stuff we like watching on TV, right? And skills, nature, and thriving, I've said, are the RPS of what bushcraft is, to me, in my observations. So often, and I think Kevin will support this observation. So often people focus on the skills, which are very necessary. If you are looking to be a bush craftsman, you do need to develop skills. You do need to have the basics down, right? And everybody knows. If we don't know it from practical experience, we know from watching all those cool TV shows. We know you have to make a shelter. We have to know how to get fresh water, how to find food, whether it's foraging for plants or trapping and hunting animals, fishing even. We know all of these things are part of the skills. But if you are actually going to be a bushcraftsman, is it skills alone that allows you to do that? Because if it's skills alone, then all these things can be practiced without ever going into the wilderness, right? We could practice fishing, setting traps, making fire. We can get the tools. We can come in a clinical setting and practice a lot of those tools, right? But there's something to be said for doing it in nature, and that's why nature is the procreation aspect of bushcraftsmen to me, because that is what recruits people to the actual identity of being a bushcraftsman. Being in nature keeps people connected to the very purpose of these skills. If you know 10 ways to make a fire, but in nature you're only ever going to need 2, well, you've wasted time, by practicing all these other things that you're never going to have a use for, assuming, of course, you're not passing these skills on to somebody. But there are other skills that you could learn. There are other aspects to being a bushcraftsman you can invest your time in if you are in nature and realize that I don't need to know 10 ways to start a fire, right, in any given wilderness that I may be in, right? So nature is a tremendous part. Establishing that relationship with nature is at the core of what being a bushcraftsman is, all right? And I think most bushcraftsmen experts would agree. And finally, thriving. One of the things that I should have mentioned, I did mention it, but articulated a little bit more with martial arts. Thriving in the wilderness means we're getting away from danger. We're getting away from dying. We're moving away from that part of, or that condition that sees us falter, that sees our demise, that sees us die, that sees us starve, that sees us, go crazy, become lost, delusional, be not safe. Thriving is what allows us to avoid that, and without the risk inherent in that, are we really doing or representing and maintaining, cultivating the spirit of bushcraftsmanship, right? So if you look at the people who are the survival experts, Les Stroud, one of my favorites, Ray Mears, one of my favorites, Bear Grylls, I respect the guy, but I mean, Jesus Christ, right? But when you look at what they do, where they go, so much of it is, if they don't know how to get by, they're done. And it's that risk that has us respect what they're doing. In the martial arts world, we look at danger, risk. Sometimes it's in competition. I look at a lot of the students in my school over the years who have had the utmost confidence, in the training arena, training with their buddies. But when they get to a competition, when they get into the fight, into the cage, into the ring, everything's different. Some of them step up to the occasion, some of them completely falter. It's a learning process for them. Some people, they practice comfortably and aggressively here, but when they get into a fight for the first time, out in the street, I've been in fights where I didn't know if I was going to live, and having that experience, at the very most, that feeling, that you could recall, maintains the spirit of what it is that I'm training when I am in here training violence, when I'm in here training and practicing my martial arts, because I understand the spirit of a thing. I understand why it is that we're doing this, right? So those are 3 examples. Now, one of the things that you'll find is everything that you do, everything, I would probably argue, in the universe has a spirit in this context, has something that represents what makes that identity. And too often times we're distracted by the ritual, of that identity, and we lose touch with the identity as a whole. Now, some people that run into these problems are people who look for checklists, right? You have people that look at things, identities, let's say martial arts, as a checklist. I know this move, I know this move, I know this rule, I know that rule. I know the history of this, but in a very almost, clinical, sanitary sense, without ever really, finding the spirit of what it is that they're describing. Reducing identities to checklists does not make it so. If we look at, one of the things that recently I saw on Facebook was, I think it was in Japan, they had these like super realistic, lifelike, robots. And, you look at the proportion, the color tones, all these different things, and you see that it's, by the checklist, exactly human, right? It's what a human looks like. But we know that there's something that we still sense that is off, in that robot, that tells us that it's not a human. We know there's more to it than just sort of going down the checklist of what we think that thing is. The spirit of that human being is not to be found in those robots, right? And we know that. We may not know why. Maybe we do, but we may not know why. We may get to the point where robots are so lifelike, that by the naked eye we can't tell. But it's the interaction that we just know something's off, right? We know, to that effect, we know when a lot of times when people are being dishonest, because we sense that they're not properly representing the spirit of somebody who's being sincere. We see, we see there are gaps in what they're putting forward, and we can sense that, right? And I think we become more powerful, certainly as men, when we look at the spirit of what it is that we say we represent. We look at the spirit of what it is we say we want to be, of what we want our children to be, of what we want to accomplish in our lives. Just recently I put up a meme of a Viking, and it's, I tend to put up a lot of those, and it was, basically paraphrasing myself, basically it was, shut up, stop talking about it and do it. Everybody wants to sound glorious without actually and going and getting the glory. It is great to talk about all these things you're going to do, but if there is no risk, right, if there is no actual real world accomplishment, then it's all useless. None of it matters, right? Without the risk. And so many times today, because this is the part of our society, the stage era of our society, where we have these leaves. Now we have these people that are so insulated, because of the strength of who we are socially, we have these people that don't have any risk. We see that in the trolls, right? The keyboard warriors who are talking, cursing people, saying things that they would never say to somebody's face. Well, this is exactly what what I'm talking about when I talk about the spirit of a thing. How am I supposed to treat you like a man if you are not maintaining, what men maintain? If you remove the risk of violence, if you remove the threat of consequence, of negative consequence, then what you are doing cannot be taken seriously because it's fraudulent in its identity, because you are not in possession of the spirit of what it is you are trying to represent. All right, hopefully that makes sense. All right, so let's move on. I picked two categories for the pressure player and unicorn, rather than sort of honing in on individuals. But I think these categories further illustrate what I'm trying to convey with this, right? So the pressure player for today, leaders. Now, when you're a leader, and I remember making a meme, right? I make a lot of memes. I got a couple hundred of them out there right now. But one of the things about leaders that I've always said is that leaders do what it takes to have others fight for their tribe's identity, and their tribe's identity's immortality, right? So if I say identity and you are familiar with the RPS formula of the loyalty matrix, then I don't have to say immortality, because that time is one of the variables that we're trying to control and make more powerful. But for the most part, a leader is somebody who understands that no matter it is what we do, the whole idea is preserving those two, variables in the loyalty matrix. We need to make the tribe last longer. We need to have the tribe live, right, survive. And we also need to make the tribe more sophisticated or more powerful in its applications. If you have somebody, right, to use as an example, a business, right, a business, and this business is a restaurant, and you have a man and his wife that work there. They're the host, the hostess, they're the cooks, they're the waiters, they're the busboys, they're the cleaners, the dishwashers, they're also the marketers, they're also the managers, they're also the bookkeepers, right? And they're a two-people show, right? They do everything. But then you look at a more established, more powerful, I would say, restaurant, and what do you have? You have a hostess who is hired for her ability to be a hostess. You have waiters who are hired for their ability to be waiters. You have cooks who are hired for their ability to cook, right? And it may be a chef, it may be a whole staff, each hired for their ability to do their specific job. Well, that is what I'm talking about when I say increasing the sophistication of a tribe. It's allowing us to specialize in these roles that collectively make us stronger, right? So in leaders, we understand that as leaders. I consider myself a leader. I'm saying we, right? I consider myself a leader, and it's my sort of commitment to inspiring and empowering and equipping my tribe members with the drive and ability to fight for our tribe's immortality. That is what makes me a leader, a good leader. Or that is a spectrum by which I will be judged as a leader, value-wise. All right. So the unicorn is another group, and we see this group all the time. We see this group really overrepresented in this society than societies past. And the group are rule followers, right? So rule followers very often have never been exposed to the spirit of a thing. They look at life as a series of checklists. They can't venture into unknown territory because nobody in that unknown territory will tell them what to do. There is no established list of rituals, right? Responsibilities for them to read if they were to venture into uncharted territory. They don't know how to go to a place they've never been before and use their processes, and by processes, really use their identity in its entirety and apply it to this new situation to maintain the spirit of what they are and what their mission is. Rule followers miss the forest for the trees, right? You look at rule followers in martial arts. Who are the rule followers in martial arts? They're the people that know all the moves. They're the people who, just recently I commented and shared an article about a man with Down syndrome in Brazil who had received a Brazilian Jiu-jitsu black belt. And one of the things that I found a lot of people, because I knew it was going to piss people off, I tend to do that on occasion, but one of the things I found in people's reactions was this sense of, well, he passed the test. He passed the test for the black belt, so he deserves a black belt. To which I respond, absolutely. And it's his instructor's black belt test. And by the way, I brought up, martial arts is supposed to be about war, right? The preparation for war and violence, developing a relationship with violence. And, a black belt is supposed to be sort of the elite threshold of standards, of accomplishment, in that preparatory process. At least that's what it's, evolved to be known as. When somebody's a black belt, it's supposed to mean something. And we all accept that as such. And in the greater community of jiu-jitsu, it's certainly always been treated as such. But here we have a guy who passes the test. But does that test represent the spirit of a thing? Because we're talking about the preparation for war and violence. Can this individual participate at an expert or elite level? Can he participate at an elite level in violence and war? I would argue no, and it's not a slight on him. It's actually the condition that he is a part of. It's what he is. He has Down syndrome. It's not his fault he has Down syndrome. His story is incredibly inspirational. It's certainly representative of a certain perseverance that I think more people should have, generally speaking. But that's not what we're talking about. That's not the spirit of the thing that we're discussing if we're talking about he was given a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I like to consider, people like that social artists. They're not martial artists, they're social artists. They participate in the ritual of martial arts without ever preserving the spirit of what martial arts actually is. So he is a social artist. He practices the social arts. And he has a social arts black belt. And there are a lot of people who are okay with him having a black belt. And who am I to judge, right? I am just a person who will say, well, if he is not representing the spirit of what I accept martial arts to be, then I do not have to acknowledge, his rank and who he is, right? But I certainly respect, the acceptance of his rank by you all in what it is that you do. The spirit of your thing is not congruent with the spirit of mine, right? And that's a distinction I like to make, right? So the spirit of a thing, it's something that we need to apply. We need to ask ourselves, what is it that we're doing? If you're a leader, if you are a father, a husband, somebody who's endeavoring to acquire another skill, to grow as an individual, which pretty much should cover all of us at this point, right? You have to ask yourself, what is the identity of my mission? What is the identity of the thing I'm trying to make stronger? Whether it's a family, it's a tribe, it's a skill set, right? What is that identity? And am I being true to it? I remember one of my fights, and I only had two, right? So my second fight, I had taken the guy down, and the ref stopped the fight, the ground and pound in like 3 minutes, 4 minutes of the first round. And I had taken the guy down, and I was in his guard. And if you don't know what the guard is, basically I was kneeling, he was on his back, his legs were wrapped around my torso, and I just kept punching him in the face until the ref stopped the fight. And after the fight, a friend of mine was in the restrooms, in the bathroom, and the guy I had beaten was in one of the stalls, locked into the stall. My friend said he heard him crying. You know, I didn't see that, so I don't know. That's what my friend said. And his friend was outside of the stall, consoling him, or at least attempting to. And one of the things he told him was, hey, that guy's a jiu-jitsu fighter, and he couldn't even pass your guard, right? Because that is where that guy's mindset was. Passing the guard is getting past that guy's legs to get a better position. But the fact that from this position, which I never looked to pass, from that position, I pounded him in his face until the ref pulled me off of him, was completely lost on this individual. Now, maybe it's a reach. Maybe he's saying whatever he can to console his friend. I totally concede that. But I only bring this up to illustrate how easily, you know, we could miss the spirit of a thing. It's, yeah, you know, it's the people who show up and get the participation medals, right? And, you know, sometimes in jiu-jitsu tournaments, you'll show up and nobody will be in your division. So you're given a medal. It's like, hey, you're the only one here, last man standing, I guess. And there are people who take that and they like that, and that is not the spirit of what it is we're supposed to be doing. You know, it's, you know, you are judged mostly by the value and the level of your opposition, of your adversity. You know, it's pressure to power. If your adversary is weak, well, what pressure are you actually enduring? And if that pressure is so significantly, you know, low, then how is it that you ever expect to be powerful? And beyond that, how is it that you would ever expect to amass any amount of glory for you and your legacy? It's not the way it works, right? We're judged by the adversity that we overcome, you know, not by the adversity we avoid. Thank you, folks, for listening. Cool talk. Glad you could join me. We do have a little bit of a different format today, and what we've decided to do is to explore different formats, and each episode is going to be different. We got a couple of very exciting episodes coming up in the next few weeks you guys are going to love, but don't think White Boy Pat's gone. He's still lurking in the back shadows, and he'll be here for the most part during a lot of the episodes. But we hope you enjoyed it, and certainly, you know, I enjoyed doing it for you, and I hope you got something out of it. Remember, thepressureproject.com is our website. info@thepressureproject.com is our contact email. thepressureprojectmembers.com is our membership site. If you've gotten anything out of this, check a membership out. I'm sure you will be glad that you did. We have, aside from the over 200 episodes of content, we also have the Loyalty Matrix Decoded series. We have the Warrior Continuum series, which is not only getting rave reviews, but is also going to be at the centerpiece of one of our major projects for next year that we'll be announcing soon. We also have our forum, right? And basically, it's something that I just get to be gracious about because we need the support, right? So let's call a spade a spade. But thanks again, guys. I look forward, as is Pat, speaking to you on the next episode. And as always, brothers, pressure to power.